welcome to Sew with Stacy. I've got a quick project for you today. We're going to make this really simple but oh my gosh, oh so cute heart-shaped keychain. We're going to use some really fun fuzzy fabric, and it really should take you less than 10 minutes to complete this project. So let's get our sewing machines and get sewing. To make our fuzzy heart-shaped keychain, you'll need a small piece of faux fur. It doesn't need to be very big, maybe about 6 inches by 6 inches. You'll also need a small amount of matching ribbon. You will also need some keychain hardware. I've chosen one that has a keychain as well as a little hook that you can attach to book bags. And you'll need to choose some thread. It doesn't matter the color, something that matches, but it won't show on the outside of your keychain. You'll need your fabric scissors to cut out the heart shape from the faux fur. And instead of a fabric marker or chalk, you can use a black Sharpie marker so that you can transfer the template onto the back of your faux fur. For our fuzzy heart keychain, we need to cut 2 heart shapes out of our fuzzy fabric. Now when you're working with fuzzy fabric like this, or fur fabric, you'll notice that there's something called a nape. And what that means is that depending on how you move your hand across the fabric, it's going to have a different look. So as an example, if I move my hand down the fabric, it has this nice, soft, shady look. And if you pull it up, the fur becomes uneven and you get a bit of a mismatch. Now when you have fabric that has a nape like this, you'll want to make sure when you cut your hearts, you're cutting them in the same direction so that you don't have one side that looks like this or the other side looks like that, a bit smoother. So to have both sides of your heart-shaped keychain look the same, we're going to cut our hearts in the same direction from our fuzzy fabric. Now with the type of fabric that I'm using here, this is a really thick fabric and it's quite coarse and slippery. And to make it a little easier to put our marking on here, I'm not going to use our typical fabric pencil or chalk. I'm actually going to go ahead and just use a Sharpie. You won't see the Sharpie through the other end of the fabric, and you get a much cleaner line to be able to sew on when you use this type of marker. So to cut my heart shapes, I'm going to grab my template. You can download this from my website, sewwithstacy.com, and I'm going to lay that, trace it around, and then move it and trace it around a second time. So then I have 2 heart shapes for my keychain. After you cut your faux fur fabric, take your fingers and just kind of wipe around the edges to get rid of any excess pieces of the fur that are left over from after cutting. You get a lot of excess that makes it a little bit more difficult to sew and could potentially get stuck in your sewing machine, which can cause some issues longer term if you don't clean your machine regularly. The first step in making our fuzzy keychain is to get all of our pieces, our ribbon, our keychain hardware, and our 2 panels of fuzzy fabric. We're going to grab our keychain hardware and put our ribbon through the hole that we have here for the hook. Next, we want to decide how long we want our keychain to be. I don't want mine too long, so I'm going to look at possibly doing it around 2 inches in length. I'm then going to go ahead and take that and one of our panels and place it at that indent of the heart. And do a little stitch in place. Not too big, just a little one, right as close to the edge as possible to keep that in place when I sew this together. It's quite heavy, so I wanted to do those stitches just to make sure that it stays in place. Now I'm going to take my second panel and lie it on top so that the hearts are aligned. Now, one of the tips I have when using fuzzy fabric is to not just use a straight stitch with a seam allowance, but to actually use a zigzag stitch along the edge as close to the edge as possible. This will make the seal for the two pieces of fabric much nicer, and it makes the look of your fuzzy keychain much nicer as well. You'll want a medium width stitch and a medium length stitch, and you're going to sew as close to that edge as possible. There is no seam allowance on this one. You might also want to use some pins just to keep that fabric in place, because this can be a bit slippery. I'll only use a few pins in some specific locations and make sure I go slow and move my fabric around. As you sew along the edges, make sure you leave maybe 2 inches opening on one side so that you can pull this right side out. You'll also want to make sure as you're sewing, you don't sew on the hardware that's inside your keychain. It will break your needle, so be extra careful there. You now want to turn it right side out. Once your panels are sewed together, you can either just quickly hand stitch that opening to close it up, and you've got your little keychain, or if you happen to have some stuffing, you can put a little bit of stuffing inside to make it a little bit more fuller. And now our last step is to just hand sew that opening closed with a needle and thread, and we'll be done. Congratulations, you've made such a super cute heart-shaped keychain. Why don't you challenge yourself a little bit and make one of our beautiful heart designed tote bags where you can match it with your brand new keychain.